Hello everyone, this is the second tutorial video for class 10. The subject is history. The topic is the first chapter in the syllabus, Rise of Nation States. We are going to continue that chapter from the previous video. Now what we know today as Germany, Italy, Switzerland, etc. These were divided into kingdoms, duchies and cantons whose rulers had autonomous territories, and in those autonomous territories there lived a large number of people who were different in culture, who were different in habits, who were different in clothing, who spoke different languages. They had no common in anything except for maybe the allegiance to a particular king under whose rule they all lived. Socially and politically, the landed aristocracy was the dominant class of the society in Europe back then. The members of this class were united by the common way of life. Their lifestyle united them. They owned estates in the countryside and also town houses. Commonly known as farmhouses nowadays. Actors and rich people have farmhouses. So in those days, the landed aristocratic members, they had town houses. They spoke French for the purpose of diplomacy. Their families were often connected by marriage. So this powerful aristocracy, they were however numerically a small group. The majority of the population was the farmers. In Western and parts of Central Europe, the growth of industrial production and trade means that the emergence of commercial class whose existence was based on production for the market. Now, when the Industrial Revolution happened, new social groups came into being. The working class population, the middle class made up of industrialists, businessmen and professionals. In Eastern Europe, it was among the liberal educated middle class that the ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges gained popularity during this time. For these new middle class people, liberalism stood for the freedom and equality of all before the law. Politically, it emphasized the concept of government by consent. Since the French Revolution, liberalism has stood for the end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution and the representative government through parliament. 19th century liberals also stressed the inviolability of personal property. The inviolability, that the right to personal property cannot be taken away by any means. The middle class of the 19th century Europe believed in this. Yet, equality before the law did not mean that all the people had voting rights. Men without property and women, they were excluded from exercising their political rights. They were excluded from voting. Throughout the 19th and even in the early 20th century, women and people without property, they had to fight for their rights. They had to protest against the government to give them these basic rights of voting. In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state-imposed restriction on the movements of goods and capital. During the 19th century, this was a strong demand of the emerging middle class in Europe. In 1834, a customs union, or which was called a Zollverein, not Wolverine, Zollverein, was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to only 2. The creation of a network of railways further stimulated mobility. People or goods were easily mobile because the creation of a large railway network, harnessing economic interest to national unification. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wider nationalist sentiments growing at that time. Now, during this time, we notice that following the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, Europe was sort of going back to conservatism. Conservatives believed that established traditional orders of the society, like the church, the social hierarchies, the monarchy, etc., they should be preserved. Also, the conservatives, they, however, believed that the conservatism they were talking about should not match with the conservatism of the pre-revolution Europe, pre-French Revolution Europe. That means most of the conservatives did not believe going back to the pre-revolution days, because they realized that modernization could exactly strengthen the traditional institutions like monarchy. For example, a modern army having an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom, these could strengthen the autocratic monarchies of Europe. In 1815, representatives of European powers, Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who had collectively defeated Napoleon, met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. They drew up the Treaty of Vienna in 1815 with the object of undoing most of the changes made by Napoleon. The Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored back to power, and France lost the territories it had conquered under Napoleon. A series of states were set up on the borders of France to check its French expansion. Thus, the kingdoms of Netherlands in the north was set up, and Genoa was added to Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given important new territories. Basically, the main intention was that restoring the monarchies which were overthrown by the French Revolution. Now, one thing to note, that these dynasties that were restored, these monarchies that were created post the Napoleonic Wars, these were autocratic in nature. They were conservatives, neo-conservatives. They did not believe in freedom of speech. They sought to curb activities that questioned the government. They did not tolerate criticism or dissent. Now, most of these imposed censorships on newspapers, books, plays to control what was being said. One of the major issues taken up by the liberal nationalists were still there. They were protesting the autocratic regimes. So one of the major issues taken up by the liberal nationalists was the freedom of press. Okay, I'm stopping here for today. In the next video lesson, we will continue with this chapter. Till then, bye.